Joe Rogan never started his podcast with the goal of becoming one of the most influential people in the world. In the beginning, he was simply an authentic guy who had enough fame to sit down with fascinating people, but as his platform grew, so did its influence. Casual conversations with comedians and unusual personalities eventually turned into serious discussions with billionaires, politicians, scientists, and major public figures. For years, fans felt like they understood the real Joe Rogan. But over time, some began to feel that he was becoming the kind of media personality he once criticized. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It came through several major decisions, beginning with his massive Spotify deal. The agreement reportedly brought Rogan around $100 million, but it also created controversy. Spotify removed a large amount of older JRE content, including episodes featuring comedians, fighters, and controversial personalities. For many fans, that was frustrating because the show's biggest appeal was that almost anything could be discussed. One episode could feature a serious conversation about science, medicine, or journalism. The next could be nothing more than Joe joking around with comedians and telling ridiculous stories. That unpredictability was what made the podcast different. There were no obvious boundaries. Rogan could talk to almost anyone, ask unusual questions, and explore ideas that rarely received hours of discussion anywhere else. Even political disagreements usually felt like conversations rather than scripted arguments. Rogan himself rejected the idea that Spotify was censoring him. He publicly argued that the company had never directly told him what he could or couldn't say. Still, the situation looked ironic to some fans because Rogan had previously criticized other platforms for removing political content. Despite the controversy, the Spotify deal was still a huge success financially, and JRE remained one of the biggest podcasts in the world. Then came another major decision, leaving Los Angeles for Austin, Texas. At the time, the move made plenty of sense. Texas offered lower taxes, warm weather, and a growing creative community. But after the move, some fans felt that something about Rogan's identity began to change. The pandemic also played a major role in the timing. California was enforcing strict restrictions, while Texas was taking a more relaxed approach. Rogan had several reasons for leaving Los Angeles. He talked about overcrowding, traffic, homelessness, economic problems, and wanting more freedom. But critics believed the pandemic was one of the biggest factors behind the decision. After moving, mainstream media quickly began portraying Rogan as increasingly aligned with conservative politics. His views on vaccines and COVID policies, combined with his relocation to Texas, made the narrative even stronger. However, many of his longtime fans still viewed him as an independent thinker and believed the media was trying to force a political label onto him. There was another problem Rogan may not have fully considered. Los Angeles gave his podcast access to an enormous network of celebrities, comedians, entertainers, and intellectuals. Many of his guests already lived in LA or regularly traveled there for work. Austin was growing quickly, but it didn't have the same entertainment ecosystem. That could make it harder for JRE to maintain the same level of variety and unpredictability that originally made the show so special. Austin also lacked the legendary comedy infrastructure of Los Angeles. Rogan had spent decades as a stand-up comedian, regularly performing at comedy clubs and remaining deeply connected to the comedy world. So after moving to Austin, he decided to build his own comedy club, the Comedy Mothership. The goal was to create something different and establish Austin as a serious new destination for stand-up comedy. At the same time, comedy itself was becoming increasingly controversial. Comedians were facing criticism over jokes involving race, gender, politics, and other sensitive subjects. Rogan increasingly presented stand-up comedy, particularly in Austin, as a place where comedians could still speak freely and push boundaries. His influence made him an important figure within the comedy community. The Joe Rogan Experience had become an enormous promotional platform for comedians, sometimes giving performers more exposure than traditional television shows. Many comedians saw their audiences grow dramatically after appearing on the podcast, creating what fans eventually called the Rogan Sphere. Rogan's move to Texas also influenced several of his comedian friends, including Tom Segura, Tony Hinchcliffe, and Shane Gillis, to relocate to Austin. But not everyone was convinced Austin could truly replace Los Angeles.
Tim Dillon's criticism wasn't simply about Austin being different from Los Angeles. The bigger issue was that Joe Rogan may have underestimated just how much LA helped his podcast succeed. Los Angeles gave JRE easy access to celebrities, comedians, entertainers, and intellectuals. Many of Joe's guests already lived there or regularly traveled to the city for work. That made it incredibly easy to bring new and unexpected people into the studio. And unpredictability was one of the biggest reasons the Joe Rogan Experience became so successful. One episode could feature a comedian telling crazy stories, while the next could involve a scientist, journalist, athlete, or controversial public figure. Austin was growing rapidly, but it didn't have the same entertainment ecosystem as Los Angeles. Joe also had another reason to care about the comedy scene. Stand-up wasn't just a side project for him. It was where his entertainment career began, and even after becoming extremely successful, he continued performing regularly. So after moving to Austin, Rogan decided to build his own comedy club, the Comedy Mothership. His goal was bigger than simply opening another comedy venue. He wanted to help create a new comedy hub in Austin and give performers a place where they could push boundaries and perform without constantly worrying about censorship. At the same time, stand-up comedy was becoming increasingly controversial. Comedians were facing criticism over jokes involving politics, race, gender, and other sensitive subjects. Rogan argued that comedy needed to remain a space where people could say uncomfortable things and still be allowed to joke about them. His influence within the comedy world had also become enormous. Appearing on JRE could expose a comedian to millions of potential fans. For some performers, one appearance could dramatically increase their audience, ticket sales, and overall popularity. Fans eventually began calling Joe's network of comedians and friends the Rogan Sphere, and his move to Texas influenced several of those comedians to follow him. Tom Segura, Tony Hinchcliffe, Shane Gillis, and others eventually became connected to Austin's growing comedy scene. But not everyone believed Austin could replace Los Angeles. Tim Dillon openly mocked the idea, pointing out the differences between the two cities, including Austin's smaller entertainment industry, extreme weather, and other quality of life issues. So while Rogan was trying to build something new in Texas, there was still a major question hanging over the move.